go a little slow in making motions in seconds, because it's hard to go a little slow.
All right. It's 7 p.m., so I'm calling to order the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of Richfield. It's June 18th. And our first order of business is approval of the minutes of the HRA meeting from May 21st, 2018.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, you have two microphones. It sounds like you have an echo.
Turn one of them off.
That's much better. Thank you.
Thank you. That works. So, does someone want to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Are there any changes, corrections, or additions? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the minutes. Next, we have approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Are there any changes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, we've approved the agenda. So our next item is the consent calendar. Mr. Stark?
Thank you, Chair Seppel. The consent calendar tonight contains one item, which, when acted upon by the HRA in one motion, would not need further discussion. However, any commissioner could request that the item be removed from the consent calendar and placed on the regular agenda for discussion and action. Tonight, the one item is the consideration of the adoption of a resolution approving the issuance of and providing the form, term, covenants, and directions for the issuance of its tax increment limited revenue note, Series 2016, in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $2,400,000 related to TIF District 2004-1, which is the city garage site. And that is the consent calendar in its entirety.
I'll move the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussions? All in favor of approving the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We've approved the consent calendar. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to a resolution. It's consideration of the adoption of a resolution related to the Chamberlain Apartments development. It would involve approving amended and restated contract for private development, a memorandum of understanding with the Metropolitan Airports Commission, tax increment finding collateral assignment agreement, and a right of entry agreement. Mr. Stark.
Thank you, Chair Seppel. At a special meeting on August 29th of last year, the Richfield HRA approved a contract for private development with Inland Development Partners for the Cedar Point South redevelopment area. The HRA further approved revisions to this contract at their October 16th, 2017 and April 16th, 2018 meetings. Since that time, a number of additional issues or points needing further contractual clarification have emerged. Those changes are summarized as follows. First is with the amended and restated contract for private development. And we did attach both a complete version and a version of just the pages with changes in red line. I would say that the majority of these edits relate to the addition of requirements from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, who is insuring the mortgage. The language of the resolution, and I'd have to look to find it, but HRA attorney shared with me that it's in here. Gives staff some ability to make non-substantive changes to the contract. And the reason I say that is because since the time you saw the contract in your packet last Thursday to today, there have already been some changes. But again, they're non-substantive changes, and those could be made independently of, as long as you approve the item tonight. Secondly is the Memorandum of Understanding with the Metropolitan Airports Commission, or MAC. Much of the property being redeveloped was originally purchased by the city using grant funds that were administered by the MAC. The use of those funds and the subsequent use of proceeds from the sales of properties acquired with those funds was governed by grant agreements made in 2002 and 2005 between the city and the MAC. Those agreements did not contemplate such a complex redevelopment and are difficult in some cases to apply to the current situation. As a result, city HRA staff, legal counsel, the developer, and MAC staff have worked to develop a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, which ultimately acknowledges that all of the parties are either meeting the precise language or the spirit and intent of the prior grant agreements, or that some alternate way of achieving the goals of those grant agreements. Included in the MOU is the requirement that the city and/or HRA expend at least $788,625 of the sale proceeds, including the $300,000 to be received from the developer at closing, on costs associated with the 77th Street Underpass project. The terms of the MOU have been approved by the MAC. However, the form of the deed and navigation agreement are still being finalized by MAC and the developer. The contract for private development provides the HRA's executive director with the authority to approve the final versions of the deed and navigation easement. And I know that, at least in principle, all the parties have come to resolution on that now. I think that they're working on getting it all in on pen and paper, but in concept, it's complete. Finally, the TIF assignment agreement. The developer intends to finance the project with a mortgage loan insured by HUD. HUD requires that the TIF note be assigned to the mortgage lender. Under the assignment of payments, the TIF revenue note provides for the assignment of the TIF note. The developer pledges the TIF note to the mortgage lender and agrees that all payments under the TIF note will be sent directly to the mortgage lender who is the authority mortgage. Upon an event of default, the mortgage lender can step into the shoes of the developer to exercise the developer's rights and remedies if it so chooses. The HRA's rights and remedies against the developer under the development agreement are not impacted by the assignment. So with that, the resolution again is hitting the four things, and I think in the motion it'd be good to touch on all four. And I would stand for any questions you might have.
Are there any questions?
Just a few comments.
Go ahead.
I actually read through the red line version because it was easier. I didn't have to read every single word, just the changes. And it brought to my attention, reminded me that there are some very positive things in there. There is a 20% provision that 20% of the housing be lower moderate income. And I think that's good. I think that's kind of our standard. So I think that's a real plus. And I'd like staff just to tell me so the total amount of TIF that's going into this project, and what's the value of the project when it's done? Ballpark.
The value of the project, I have a number in my head, but I want to make sure it's right. Is it, I want to say 34? No. 45? Oh, I will let the developer answer that question.
Oh, that would be good.
Instead of,
Go ahead and please state your name for the record.
Sure, Commissioners. My name's Bob Cunningham, and I'm with Inland Development Partners. Right now, we aren't really qualifying a value. We're saying the cost is going to be approximately $50 million. So it's a little north of John's 45.
All right, thank you.
And the TIF total was?
I won't tell you that in a second unless somebody else has.
Okay. I guess
happen
they have
to
the answer.
That off the top of my head. It's $8.4 million.
Okay.
8.4, you said?
Okay. So that's a good leveraging of our dollars to get an important addition to the community on the east side. And the other thing I just wanted to comment on, as I was zipping through all of that tiny fine print, was that we do have a request in there, or a requirement in there for, I think it was 2 to 3, we prefer 3, amenities into the space, sculptures, murals, unique play equipment in the public space, and that'll be great. So, the Arts Commission thanks you, as does this former council person.
I also wanted to comment on the fact that we can use the money that we get from the sale of the property towards the underpass. So it's being reinvested in Richfield instead of just going back to the MAC. I think it's good that it's being reinvested in Richfield and helping to finance that. So thank you for whoever came up with that idea.
Yeah, I would say that the executive director, Mr. Devich, did a lot of the heavy lifting on that.
All right. Do we have other questions or comments? I know this was a lot of information and very detailed, so thank you for putting that all together. And as Commissioner Sandell said, the red line version helped a great deal.
Well, I will go ahead and make the motion that we adopt, if I can find it correctly here, we adopt the amended and restated contract for private development, the memorandum of understanding with the Metropolitan Airports Commission, the tax increment financing collateral assignment agreement, and the right of entry agreement, with the understanding that some of the finalized terms are not totally done, but that staff would have the ability to make non-substantive amendments or changes.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further comments or discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, we've adopted the resolution. Oh, and if looks like the developer would like a moment to speak with us.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. This has been a long, several years of effort to get to this point. This is our last public hearing before we have a groundbreaking. The signs that say road closed starting July 11th just went up. That's our first tangible sign of progress that's not on an 8.5 by 11 sheet. It's very important for us to take a moment and thank the City Council, who's not here, the HRA, the Planning Commission, but especially thank the staff and the city attorneys. We couldn't be here without everybody's support, assistance, especially as we kind of round the home stretch with this U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development financing. They're very insistent on their points of view, and the city staff and the city attorneys have been great in getting us what we needed so that we could get to our closing, which is tentatively scheduled for July 10th. So we'll have a groundbreaking sometime after that. We're still figuring out when we're going to have the gold-painted shovels and hard hats, but that's coming. But again, thank you, everybody, for your support in getting to this day.
Thank you as well. I know it was a cooperative effort. All right, next we have HRA discussion items. Are there any items that anyone would like to bring up? I actually had 2 questions, and the first one is, could you give us an update on Cedar Point 2?
Yep. Give me 1 second. So Cedar Point 2, of course, across the street from Target Home Depot, they submitted their land use application today to go through the planning and zoning process. They have been in communications, or at least attempted communications, with all 11 homeowners. They've been successful in having discussions with 8. There are 3 that they still haven't been able to sit down and have a discussion with. Of the 8 they've spoken with, they have 2 signed purchase agreements. They have 5 more that are hopeful to be purchase agreements in the next month or so. They have applied to the Metropolitan Council for livable communities funds. or I'm sorry, the application's underway. That will be turned in later this month. You probably have seen the big construction trailer on the site. That's actually getting a facelift here soon. They have a wrap designed for it that's going to be specific to the project. They are hopeful of moving 3 existing homes that the HRA owns off of the site fairly soon. I think within the next 30 to 45 days, they've identified locations to move those homes to. So we're very happy with the progress they've been making, and we hope that the homeowners are as well. There'd been a continuing discussion, and this is maybe more in the weeds than you care to hear, but a continuing discussion about what's called the Uniform Relocation Act that governs when somebody's acquired for a development project, how they're dealt with and the kinds of funds that they receive. Traditionally, developers like to make an argument that they are not subject to the Uniform Relocation Act. It provides a lot more benefits to the homeowners. In this case, the developer said, yep, we think in the end, following the URA is going to be good for the residents out there and good for them as a developer. And so they are going to be following that. And we think that with that, homeowners will be very satisfied with the offers that are made.
They have another deadline coming up, right? They were quarterly deadlines.
I think that
Is it July?
their last deadline is to have the development agreement, and that is in July.
Yeah.
And so it is our plan to be here next month with the development agreement for your consideration.
Perfect.
We've been working hard on that, and
And they've met all the others?
yes.
Okay.
The land use application, they were a little late on because they made some significant site plan changes. So that was supposed to have been turned in last month. It was turned in this month.
Any other questions on that topic? The other thing that I was curious about, a number of months ago, there were a lot of hearings about the Southdale Library project and different things related to that, and I was wondering if we know about how that is going and how it might affect Richfield.
I wouldn't say we know. I think we've heard, and you've had some conversation about it as well, I believe. As you said, there was a lot of activity about a year ago. I don't remember exactly when. It was cold months, so it might have been more than a year ago. There were, monthly meetings, and then everything has been fairly quiet for quite some time. And so we were surprised when we saw something in the newspaper about a week ago. What the newspaper article described was a 55,000 square foot library, which is about the size of the existing library, on the northwest quadrant of the site. So that's on the Edina side, on the north portion. When you kind of, by process of elimination, where they talk about where every component is going to be, you figure out that parking is contemplated for the northeast quadrant, which directly abuts Xerxes and the Richfield side. There's talk of either surface parking or structured parking. The structured parking discussion seemed more like an afterthought. It seemed like surface parking was what was being contemplated. I think for us, that would be kind of the worst outcome. So we're going to be following up on that. They are talking about a trail connection to Adams Hill Park in Richfield, and then the southern half of the lot would be sold for development. I don't think that they know exactly what that development would look like. It would be, up to the developer and what they propose. They are talking on the library portion about demolition of the existing building in next fall of 2019, with construction soon thereafter. There is an open house planned for July 23rd from 7 to 9. at the Southville Library. So I would, anybody that's watching on TV, if you have an interest or if you live in that part of town, I'd highly recommend going there. You know, the library sits in Edina, but it sits on our border, and it's a regional library. It's not Edina's library. It's a regional library. And so this means as much to Richfield as it does to Edina.
I would also
Go ahead.
interject, being on the library board. When I saw the Star Tribune article, I reached out and asked for the deck that was shared. So I do have a copy of that. They are, I was told they're actively working on getting that onto a public website so people could see it, but attend those meetings. The library board doesn't actually have anything to do with the building itself. But everyone in Richfield should go. So if you're watching, get out to that meeting.
Thank you. One last question. So if the property is sold to Edina, then does the Edina HRA get involved? Or is it simply between the county and the developers?
You know, I think it depends on what a developer might be asking for. If they're asking for financial assistance, then certainly Edina would become involved. If they're not, you know, Edina Planning and Zoning would become involved, but not the Edina HRA necessarily.
Yeah, as soon as it's sold to Edina, it follows all their regulations. It's no longer county property, it's city property.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other discussion items? All right, then we'll move on to the executive director's report.
At the last city council meeting, I can't remember the date, if you were watching, you might have heard the city manager announce that his resignation is pending at the end of November. The city manager is also the executive director of the HRA, so that means we will be looking for a new executive director as well. Presumably, the executive director would be part and parcel with the city manager position when that's advertised and filled, but I can't say that for sure.
Well, we certainly appreciate all that Executive Director Devich has done, and he will be sorely missed. So he's not here to hear it, but thank you.
I'll pass that along.
Thank you. All right, claims and payroll.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or are there any questions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving claims and payroll, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the claims and payroll. Seeing no other business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.